Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where today I want to learn more about the technical and legal risks of generative AI and possible solutions around that. Once again, I've invited Dr. Ilia, Chief Architect at ImmuniWeb and Adjunct Professor of Cybersecurity and Cyber Law at Capital Technology University. And he's going to be sharing some insights on how to address the risks. And we're going to be talking about everything from ChatGPT and more specifically, what steps content owners can take to protect their intellectual property from being used in AI training data, and also how terms of service could be updated to explicitly prohibit the use of content for AI training, and also explore what the role of contract law could possibly play in resolving disputes over the uses of protected IP and training data, and how software developers can better protect their IP from being used in AI training data too. These are just a few of the things I want to talk about today. He's the perfect guest to talk about this, and I'm really excited to get him back on the podcast. So buckle up and hold on tight, because it's time for me to beam your ears all the way to Geneva in Switzerland, where he's waiting to share his insights today. So a massive warm welcome back to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do, just for anyone that's missed our previous conversations?
Good morning, Neil, and thank you for having me here today. So my name is Ilia. I'm the Chief Architect at ImmuniWeb, a global application security company headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. And I also serve as an adjunct professor of cybersecurity practice and cyber law at Capital Technology University.
And it's been 1 year already since we last spoke. And if we look back at our lives 1 year ago, if we were to talk about things like artificial intelligence, there'd be a few techies out there that'd be interested. But for most businesses, for most average users, they would have had very little idea, even interest about what they would see as just another tech buzzword. But of course, fast forward to January 2023. Now, everybody is talking about ChatGPT. It's achieved 100 million users in just 2 months, something that took even TikTok 9 months to achieve. And suddenly, everyone kind of gets what AI is and the kind of value that it can offer. And from here, we can expect turbocharged growth of similar products that will all massively collect training data from various public sources, including things like websites, libraries, blogs, or social networks, etc. So I wanted to invite you on the podcast today to see what you thought of all these new changes and trends. So can you set the scene for the conversation today and tell me your thoughts on ChatGPT and where you think we're heading?
Sure, I'll be happy to do so. Perhaps I won't have a simple answer, but I'll try to shed some light on different aspects of ChatGPT and also on the generative AI in general. So I think that ChatGPT is an amazing product that actually skyrocketed everyone's awareness about the practical opportunities that can be brought by AI. And for example, if we compare where we are today to, let's say, February 2022, I would say that virtually pupils in primary school, teachers, police officers, everybody else, they are all talking about AI and machine learning. So I think that ChatGPT has made an important contribution to raise everyone's awareness about the opportunities and capabilities of modern AI. I also absolutely agree with you that we have I would say, underlying, or probably I would call it a dilemma about training data.
Yeah.
Because from a technical and I'd say scientific viewpoint, ChatGPT, in my opinion, it hasn't created a revolution, okay? Because, for example, law firms, they've been using AI technologies or AI-powered, AI-driven, however we call them, for different tasks in legal practice since almost a decade with a growing success. And we see that many law firms are now learning how to accelerate their caseload, how to improve their internal processes, how to deliver more value to their customers by using different AI technologies and different tools that enable them to work faster and to work better. So generative AI is not a new phenomena, and many, I would say, less sophisticated examples have been with us since many years. I think the strongest competitive advantage of ChatGPT is that it's probably one of the largest, that it probably has one of the largest training data sets. And basically speaking, this is what makes it so powerful by being capable to answer any questions about science, about politics, about history, about anything you ask it. Getting back to the story of the training data, there is a problem how we can fairly remunerate authors and I would say inventors, owners, however we call them, of this data, because we're talking about videos, we're talking about music, we're talking about different research papers, we're talking about images. And the problem is that as of today, the enacted copyright legislation doesn't provide sufficient protection to the owners of creative content against such use cases when their intellectual property is being used for machine learning training purposes. And basically speaking, many people who've been creating something unique, something beautiful, they're now questioning themselves whether they should continue or not, given that their content will likely, I would say, collected without authorization and used to create similar pieces of content. And for example, I think if you and I learn that our podcast is being used for training purposes, and in 6 months from now, tech startup will announce that we don't need podcasts by people anymore, we will just generate interactive podcasts ourselves, being AI generated podcasts, probably will not be very excited about continuing in our daily work about creating content, bringing fruits of our intellectual labor to everyone. So I think that we may face a highly undesirable situation that most people will stop producing creative content or will stop publishing it. And eventually it will impair other people's to learn. And in order to tackle this problem, I believe that we need to have a new legislation that will create a new fundamental right, like right to privacy and protection of our personal life, that will grant content creators, content owners, right to restrict tech startups, tech giants, any AI companies using their content for machine learning training purposes without their freely given consent. Similar to GDPR, you may use personal data, you may use it for innovation, to make better business, to deliver more value to customers. But prior to collecting and processing the data, you must obtain a freely given explicit consent from the data subject. And I believe that this is a fair and sustainable approach. So we should probably consider a legislation that would empower content creators to either say, I'm happy to give all my content for any purposes. You can use it for machine learning. That's perfectly fine. I'm willing to contribute to technical progress. Or perhaps saying, no, I don't wish to share it with tech startups and I'm only producing my content for human beings. Or perhaps a middle ground saying, yes, you may use my content, but I'd like to have a royalty or fee or one-time payment, however we call it. So this will promote healthy and sustainable development of the AI industry, ensuring that human beings who create content for training purposes, and I'd like to emphasize that we will continuously need new content. Okay, it's not just that we trained our model today and we are done. Most startups, more tech giants, they will continuously need new, fresh, up-to-date content. And in order to produce it, we'll need people willing to produce it. So we need to have some sort of protection in order to enable people to share, to promote, or to sell their intellectual labor.
100% with you. And there's also a big accuracy problem as well, where it will take lots of different content from a variety of sources and then create something completely unique. But I was reading the other day that CNET has had to review the accuracy of all its AI written articles after multiple major corrections, because it ultimately fabricates information and bungles facts and almost creates a word salad of content that sounds great, reads great, but not factually correct. And a few days ago, I wrote in ChatGPT to write a personal bio for myself. When I got the results, it all sounded great, looked great, all very plausible, but factually, it was way, way off. And you did mention intellectual property there, and it is such an important topic right now. So my question has to be, what steps could a content owner and content creator take to protect their intellectual property from being used in AI training data?
So that's a great point. And perhaps just before we discuss how content creators and owners can protect their intellectual property, one more thing to add, that I also believe that we may need a legislation that will require mandatory disclosure of training data sets, not of the data itself, of course, because it can be confidential, but of the sources. So for all AI companies of a certain size, I think we need the legislation that would require them to mandatorily disclose the provenance of their data for training to prevent misuse, abuse, unwarranted data scraping on the web, or using of copyrighted work in their training process. So it will enhance transparency, it will enhance accountability, it will promote collaboration among content creators and tech companies. Because what you're saying about incorrect or biased results generated by AI, it's also a question of data sources. And from a cybersecurity perspective, whilst it's an arduous and time-consuming and resource-consuming task, we can imagine that for some specific models that are using just a comparatively small number of sources for training purposes, sophisticated cyber gangs may deliberately poison the data in order to manipulate the training data and in order to mislead users of generative AI. So I think that a legislation that would require all sufficiently big AI companies to transparently and regularly disclose the provenance of their training datasets will be highly beneficial for society. Now talking about avenues how we can protect our intellectual, and sort of disclaimer, this is not a legal advice, but from a practical viewpoint, what content owners may consider, because a copyright protection doesn't provide sufficient protection against unauthorized usage of their data, of their content for machine learning training purposes, as I've just mentioned. They can consider implementing a special clause, a special provision in their terms of service, whether on their website or in their application or their online platform, saying that this content must not be used for machine learning training purposes whatsoever else. They can also consider restricting any automated data scraping. This is already fairly widespread, and many websites have a terms of service clause saying that you must not scrap this website by automated bots, tools, and so on. And it can actually be a challenge, a legal challenge for many AI startups that are unaware or ignore the terms of service of the website that they scrap for content. And eventually they may end up with a lawsuit. Okay. So getting back, you may wish to review your terms of service or terms of use, however you call it. It's a good idea to talk to a lawyer, because depending on the jurisdiction, you may end up in court saying that your terms of service are unenforceable, or the specific wording of your clause is unenforceable and void. So talk to a lawyer, get the legal advice. It will cost you virtually nothing, because it's a very simple question. I'd say we have a well-established body of contract law. And basically speaking, it will provide you with a foundational legal protection okay, against unwarranted usage of your content for machine learning training purposes. Of course, we'll have all kinds of abuses. We'll have unethical businesses from different parts of the world that will scrapping your website regardless of the terms of service. But against large companies, against honest startups, it will be a fair protection. And you may also consider inserting a clause that if someone or if an AI company is willing to use your content, here's a specific email, reach out to us, and we will be happy to discuss licensing conditions to make usage of our content fair and sustainable. So this is a way it may work. Same for engineers who are unwilling that they openly publish on GitHub or wherever else. If they don't wish that this software to be used for machine learning training purposes, they may also update their licensing agreement, inserting a specific clause saying that this piece of software is provided for free, but it is provided for human beings by human beings, and it is not designed and it is not intended to be used for machine learning training purposes. Once again, it may be a good idea to review this clause with a lawyer from your country to make sure that it will be enforceable.
And as you said there's going to be different laws in each country. Do you think we will get to a place where terms of service can be updated to explicitly prohibit the use of content for AI training purposes? Do you think that's realistic? And how do we get to a place like that?
I think that's perfectly possible. And I would say from a different viewpoint, we already have many websites that expressly prohibit any data scraping, any automated crawling, any bots from using their website, from accessing their content. Okay. So I think that it's perfectly able that many online libraries, many online collections of creative content, they will make specific provisions saying that you must not use our data for any AI, machine learning, big data, whatsoever else purposes. And this will provide, I would say, foundational protection against large businesses, because they'll probably bear in mind that such provision is valid. And if they violate it on a recurrent basis, they will likely end up in court and will probably have fairly severe consequences, such, I would say, unauthorized scrapping that is actually prohibited by terms of service. But at the end of the day, I would stay more positive. I don't think that people will prohibit all and any usage of their data for machine learning. I think we will rather have people aware that we can provide AI companies with some of our content, okay? And the best pieces that we've been writing for weeks and polishing and investing our time, investing our unique knowledge and skills, this is something that we'll keep for ourselves. We are willing to share it with human beings, but we're not willing to share it with AI companies. So I think we'll attain a fair balance where AI companies will have sufficient and quality of content for continuous training purposes, and people will be fairly remunerated when their creative content is being used for machine learning training purposes.
And what role do you think contract law will play in resolving some of those inevitable disputes over the use of protected IP in AI training data? Presumably there's going to need to be improvements there too, right?
Well, I don't think that we'll have like an avalanche of lawsuits, okay? Yeah. And in my opinion, clearly written, explicitly clear clause saying that any content from this website or portal or online library must not be used for machine learning purposes without our authorization. For any questions, please reach out to us. This will rather promote negotiations between content owners and AI companies. And for violations, probably we'll have several lawsuits that will be highly publicized, because either they will involve a massive, I would not call it theft, but unauthorized use of data in breach of terms of service, or maybe because they will implicate a major player on the AI market. Okay. So I don't think that we need any changes to the existing contract law, at least in those countries that I know fairly well, because we have a well-established practice and case law saying that terms of service on the website, if properly written, if properly presented, if properly accepted, they are enforceable. They are something that you cannot ignore. They create a binding contract. And if someone breaks the terms of service, you can actually file a lawsuit and claim damages. So I don't think that we need any changes to contract law, contrasted to the enacted copyright law, where we will probably see some ongoing improvements, or probably I would say modifications to fairly balance interests of copyright holders and tech companies. But contract law provides tenable, sound protection is sufficient to make sure that people will not be misusing your content. Of course, we're not talking about cyber criminals. Actually, every single terms of service says that you must not hack this website. You must not perform any security testing without authorization. But obviously, cyber criminals ignore it, and you will probably never sue them for breach of contract. But for law-abiding companies, and I think on the AI market, most companies are law-abiding entities, so they will rather be motivated to read your terms of service carefully and to negotiate with you if they wish, using your content for machine learning training purposes.
And of course, content creation is only one small part of the argument here. So my next question has to be, how can software developers better protect their IP from being used in the same kind of AI training data that we're seeing increasing here?
So basically speaking, if they are sharing their source code online, for example, on different open source projects or samples of malware, because now we have a lot of discussions around, for example, ChatGPT capabilities, or creating simple malware, or creating simple hacking tools. If penetration testers, security researchers wish to restrict AI companies using their intellectual property that they're sharing for human beings, not for tech companies, they can consider inserting identical clause to their software license agreement. Okay, so basically the process is identical, because software license agreement is also an enforceable contract if properly written, if properly presented, if properly incorporated into your software. So once again, it may be a good idea to talk to your lawyer, and he or she will explain you how to make a software license agreement enforceable. And I believe that then software developers who are willing to share their source code, who are willing to promote innovation, they will be able to get additional payments for their work from tech companies, and it will promote even more innovation, because right now, many journalists, they have, I would say, a single source of income. But if for a selected portfolio of their articles, they can get an extra income from AI companies because they wish to use their articles for machine learning training purposes, I think everyone will be happy, and we will see wealthier and happier content owners, and also AI companies with sufficient volume of data to continually improve their products.
Do you think large AI companies will eventually be required to disclose all the sources of data used for their training purposes? Do you think we'll eventually arrive at that place too?
I think that, of course, they will enthusiastically fight against such legislation, arguing that it will hinder innovation, it will kill technical progress, something that we already observed back in 2018 with GDPR. We had many large businesses arguing against GDPR, saying that it will kill business, it will book huge and unprecedented number of bankruptcies. But what we can see in 2023, that we rather have a healthier and more sustainable business, that people now have control over their personal data. Of course, we still have data breaches. We still have unethical companies that are misusing our personal data, but that's a different part of the story. But I believe that GDPR, whilst not being a perfect legislation, because probably it's an arduous task to find a perfect law, but it's something that is definitely making our society safer and better protected from different viewpoints. And I think AI companies will definitely argue against any regulation of AI. They'll probably rather promote self-regulation, whatsoever else. But I hope that makers will find the right balance and will enact legislation that will, on one side, protect innovation and technical progress. On the other side, protect content creators, because otherwise we may end up either with a tech monopoly that will kind of collect the integrity of content that humanity has been creating since centuries and saying, now we are the owner and we are selling your data back to you. Perhaps something not very desirable from a social viewpoint. Or we may end up when AI technologies will indeed be hindered because people will have too much power, excessive power to control their data. And I don't think that this is a desirable outcome neither, because I'm a big supporter, I'm a big component of AI, and I believe that machine learning technologies can significantly increase quality of our life. And for example, by intelligently automating different routine, time-consuming, boring, trivial tasks, enabling people to focus on something creative, something that they enjoy, and something that can eventually bring them more money and increase quality of their life.
Completely agree with you. And we have talked about our concerns around this new technology today, but I don't just want to talk about the bad side. I do also see how it could transform something like Microsoft Office and make people naturally more productive. It could make things, for example, easier, such as producing presentations in multiple languages very quickly, or quickly creating Excel formulas, finding those emails that you've lost somewhere, and also checking large contracts and white papers and things like that, making them more readable. But I'm curious, what excites you about this space and where it's taking us?
I believe that AI will be able to support many professionals to concentrate on their most complex, most creative, more sophisticated tasks and problems. Okay, because for example, if we're talking about contract review, indeed, many things can be automatically detected, saving a huge amount of time, especially when we're dealing with large contracts. However, you will still need lawyers who will be reviewing specific clauses, who will be making sure that specific wording is present in a specific clause, because they know the practical side of law. They know how a specific court in a specific jurisdiction, maybe even a specific judge, will react to a specific clause. They know perfectly well how to make your enforceable and how to avoid wasting time by using templates, because one of the things that people have been saying that now we can have all kinds of templates, for example, that produced by ChatGPT. And yes, however, being familiar with different templates, either security policies, different privacy policies, terms of service, contracts. Basically speaking, you already had thousands, I don't say millions of readily and freely available contracts of substandard quality, to put it mildly. So it's a pretty bad idea to use such a template without getting a legal advice, because yes, you may have a contract that looks good and you don't think that anything is wrong with it. But if one day you eventually end up in litigation, you may find that the contract has no legal power, you cannot enforce it, or a specific provision cannot be enforced, or that you may need to travel to Canada or Hong Kong or South Africa for litigation. So it is always a good idea to talk to your lawyer to get a qualified legal advice. But your lawyer will be more efficient and effective if he or she is assisted by AI, because previously they've been using their their personal time to review every single comma, every single phrase, every single clause. And they've been billing you many hours for pretty simple work. Now they can automate many tests and checks, and we have specific legal software for contract reviews that is also a form of generative AI. We have a lot of solutions and tools that can analyze contracts for different problems, that can bring you different case law, that can create a contract or can create different core documents based on the input. So I would say AI in legal practice is not something new. I would say it has been here since a decade, but it will enable your lawyers, for example, to make their work faster, probably better, because after 5 hours of reading a contract, you'll probably be tired and you may meet a serious problem. So I believe that AI in all industries, if we're talking about lawyers, if we're talking about cybersecurity, if we're talking about technology, if we're talking about journalists, it can significantly increase everyone's productivity. And for example, journalists, instead of starting with basic introduction, with fact collecting processes, they will be able to write their articles faster, but their creativity, their unique experience, their ingenuity will still be required. And for example, they can keep the same income as they have today, but they'll be working 2 days a week, something that I believe will definitely make our society happier. Or for people who enjoy their work, they can work 5 days a week as they do now, but they will be getting 2 or 3 times more money thanks to intelligent automation of different tasks and processes that in the past they had to do manually. And now that can be intelligently automated by AI. So I'm very optimistic about AI, conditioned to legislation that will relate AI, making it fair for content creators and for AI companies.
And as someone that writes for a living, you've just made me feel a little bit better about the future. So thank you for that. But outside of everything we've talked about today, I'm curious, are there any other big tech trends that interest you, excite you, or you're monitoring closely at the moment?
Probably, I would say that we definitely see that cloud is becoming a daily part of our life. And one more point here directly related to AI, especially for large companies, they may wish to carefully read terms of service of different SaaS providers, okay? Because even the largest SaaS providers of document management, contract management, social network platforms, they start introducing clauses into their terms of service that all your messages, all your documents, all your content that you are uploading or that you are otherwise providing to our platform may and likely will be used for data mining, for machine learning training purposes. And you will have no objection over it. You accept, you agree, and so on. And this can be an interesting task for your law teams, in-house lawyers, to review your terms of service, your contracts you have with major tech companies, to make sure that you are not explicitly authorizing them to take all your corporate data, including some confidential data and proprietary data and trade secrets, for machine learning training purposes. It's not a huge risk, practically speaking, because they'll definitely not be stealing your trade secrets. But if you are unwilling, and I guess most corporations will be unwilling that their corporate, their proprietary, their internal data is used for machine learning training purposes, they may wish to review terms of service with major online platforms and SaaS vendors.
And we've talked about so much today, and there is this real increasing pressure on absolutely everyone, and I mean everyone listening too, to be in an almost state of continuous learning to try and stay ahead of the curve and keep up to speed with the latest tech trends, etc. So I'm curious, as somebody right in the heart of this space, where or how do you self-educate to keep up to speed with everything and that pace of technological change?
I'd probably say that reading is a good way to continually improve your knowledge. For example, I try to read a book per week when I have time. Yeah. But I would say that reading, in my opinion, is one of the best ways to stay up to date with technical progress. And it's not necessarily reading about machine learning and different other things. You may read some good books just for pleasure. You'll certainly learn new things about different people, about different countries, about different cultures, about different kitchens. It's important to diversify your knowledge, because if you'd like to learn about cloud security, that's great. If you'd like to become a machine learning data scientist, that's great. But try to diversify your knowledge. Don't narrowly focus only on one topic or on a topic that seems to be super hot, like blockchain, and try to read something that will inspire you, that will make you happy. Because if you're only reading like tech books, it will wait you in a couple of months or years, depending how resilient you are. But read any books that you like, because you will definitely learn something new, something valuable. If it's not something that you'll be using in your daily professional practice, it brings you some creative ideas. So don't hesitate to read. And I believe that Amazon made a true revolution in book business. And Amazon.com is my favorite website to search for new books. And I'd probably say that reading is something that can both motivate you to create and something that will improve your professional skills.
100% with you. And if you don't have time, if you're listening to this and you don't have time to read, I would say check out something like Audible too. I must admit, if I'm walking my dog or something like that, I always have an audio book on so I can learn while I'm doing absolutely nothing during that dead time. And it's a pleasure having you on the podcast today, as always. But for anyone listening that would like to find out more information about your work, everything we talked about today, what's the best starting point for everything?
I would probably say immuniweb.com, or just feel free to connect on LinkedIn.
Well, again, I'd love chatting with you today about the ChatGPT, some of the challenges around intellectual property, how we move forward, especially around the importance of transparency in the development of AI, and how we navigate through legislation, etc. So many big talking points, but just a big thank you for sharing your insights with me today.
It was a pleasure, and thank you for having me here today, Neil.
A big thank you for today's guest for coming on here, discussing the importance of transparency in the development of AI and how that could be achieved better through legislation, essentially, and what legal rights individuals and organisations will end up having to restrict the usage of IP for AI training purposes. So many big talking points here, and there's a lot to cover in a 30-minute podcast episode. And you've heard from me, you've heard from today's guest. I want to hear more about how you see this landscape evolving. Have we opened a big Pandora's box here, and now the genie's out of the box? There's no going back. But what does this mean for the future? What excites you? What concerns you? I want to get all sides of the argument here open for discussion. And whether that be recording a quick voicemail note on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and sending it over, and I can use that on the show, or you want to just send me a quick message, or you want to email me, or you want to actually sit down and have a conversation with me, whatever it is. You can do all those things by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. So I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this subject, but time for me to go now. So I'll return again tomorrow with another guest, but thanks for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.